I would like to invite Dr. Merav Galili, CEO of Menomadin Foundation. Since the attack, Menomadin Foundation have been working to strengthen the resilience of the kibbutzim and municipalities. Merav will be joined by the heroes Chaim Taib mentioned, victims of October 7th.
Ladies and gentlemen, Erev Tov. When I was approached by the organizers of the March of the Living to moderate this panel, a shiver of profound reverence ran through me. To sit on stage with men and women who are nothing short of biblical heroes is an honor that fills me with both humility and awe. At the same time, the core message of remembrance and revival, Zikaron v'Tkuma, have made it clear that this occasion transcends each of us individually. It is with great excitement and deep respect that I introduce to you three inspiring panelists. Each brings a unique and powerful perspective that promises to enrich our understanding and challenge our hearts. Liat Atzili. Liat moved from Kibbutz Shomrat to Nir Oz in the Western Negev 30 years ago, following her love for her husband, Aviv Atzili, a member of Kibbutz Nir Oz. Aviv was the kibbutz's garage manager and an artist. Together, they raised three children, Ofri, Neta, and Aya. Liat teaches history and civics, specializing in one subject, the Holocaust. She coordinates trips to Poland, and 2 years ago, she completed a course for guides at Yad Vashem. Liat was abducted to Gaza and held captive by Hamas for 54 days. And after her release, she was informed that her husband, Aviv, was killed in action on October 7th while fighting in the kibbutz. Liat, I chose to start with you because there is something profoundly shocking, even slightly ironic, about this connection between a Holocaust educator and the fact that you were a victim of a brutal kidnapping on October 7th, and to all our sorrow, you lost your husband. Would you be willing to share with us one experience from your captivity that has stayed with you?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. There's one thing from all those days in Khan Yunis that really stayed in my mind. On the day that I was abducted, on Saturday, October 7th, I was brought to a family home in Khan Yunis. There were women, children, men, a whole family. And when I arrived there, I was obviously terrified. And the people who brought me there walked me into the house, sat me down on a sofa, and the mother of the family, 60-ish-year-old woman, she just came and sat down next to me. She put her arm around me and held my hand. That just really stayed with me. And for me, that's it's a sign that people have a choice always. She didn't have to do that. Nobody told her to be humane to me. Nobody told her that she had to host me in her home. She chose to make me feel as unafraid and as good, I guess, as I could in that situation. And that's something that's really stayed with me.
Thank you, Liat. When you were informed that you were being released from captivity, what went through your mind? What reality did you think you would face upon returning to Israel?
The day before I was released home, I met a woman from my kibbutz, from Nir Oz, who was a lot more informed than I was about what had happened. She'd spent some time with the other women from our kibbutz who had been able to listen to the radio, to Israeli radio. So I knew a lot of what had happened, which up until then I didn't know. And I was terrified. I didn't know what had happened to my children and to my husband. She didn't know either. So I was really, really scared of what my family had gone through, what had happened to them. I didn't want to find out. And I knew that the kibbutz and the whole region had suffered very, very badly from the attack. And I was terrified. I was terrified. And there's no other word to describe how I felt.
You said you knew that one of your girls was not in the kibbutz, so you were at least relaxed about her.
Yeah, Aya was in the Arava. She's doing a year of volunteer work on Kibbutz Lotan, and luckily she wasn't home that weekend. So the thing that gave me one of the things that gave me strength during that whole period of time was that I knew that she was alive. And I knew that no matter what had happened, I had to get home, and I had to come home a whole person. And I had to stay her mother, the mother that she knew, and that I had to do that for her.
Thank you, Liat. Yeah. Nathalie Sanandaji, born in New York, is the only daughter of an Israeli mother and an Iranian father. Nathalie participated in the Nova Festival and survived the horrors of the massacre. Since then, she has been sharing her story with the world and fighting against anti-Semitism worldwide. Nathalie, you survived the horrific massacre at Nova and are now actively fighting against anti-Semitism. How do you explain to yourself and to us the connection between these two events, the massacre October 7th and anti-Semitism, and what can be done?
So, as a New Yorker, born and raised, I always considered myself very lucky. You know, I live in New York, which is the biggest Jewish population outside of Israel in the entire world. And I always thought, you know, I'm so lucky to live in a place where I don't have to deal with anti-Semitism, where it doesn't affect me. And since October 7th, I came home to a completely different New York. I realized that what I thought to be true was wrong. Almost what was harder than, you know, going through October 7th and running for my life was coming back and seeing the world's reaction to what happened on that day. And I came to the realization that the anti-Semitism was always there. It was just, you know, kind of beneath the surface. And after the attacks on October 7th, people felt more comfortable expressing their anti-Semitism. They felt more comfortable showing the fact that they're anti-Semitic. And that's why I'm out here and I'm speaking about what happened on that day, not because necessarily my story is that significant compared to all the stories from that day, but because I want to be the voice, number one, for those who no longer have a voice, those who were killed on that day, those who are too traumatized to speak since that day, and those who were taken hostage and still being held hostage. I feel that we need to put a face to the story to make it human again, because a lot of people all over the world, not just in New York, have really dehumanized what happened to the Jewish people on that day. But it makes you realize, you know, anti-Semitism didn't end when the Holocaust ended. It's still there. It was just, you know, it was beneath the surface.
I have somewhat a personal question. Survivors of the Nova massacre suffer from unimaginable post-trauma with, you know, each individual coping on their own way, of course. Do you think that your professional journey working in full speed, mea kamash, is actually your therapy and your way to cope with your trauma?
1,000%. In the beginning, when I first started doing interviews and speaking out, I started interviewing 4 days after the attacks. And originally, what I said to myself was, like I just said before, that I'm speaking on their behalf. I want to be their voice. And I really thought, I'm just doing it for them. And not until a few months after did I realize how much it was also for me. It was my therapy. It really helped with coping with the trauma. So yes, it's definitely healed me in a lot of ways.
Thank you, Natalie. Thomas Hand, or we said Thomas, right? We said Thomas, not Thomas.
Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas. We talked about it earlier. Thomas was born in Ireland, came to Israel for a 3-month volunteering program at Kibbutz Be'eri, and has stayed ever since. On October 7th, his 9-year-old daughter Emily and her friend Hila Rotem Shushani were kidnapped from their home. Thomas was initially informed that his daughter Emily had been murdered, but about a month after the massacre, the family received an update that Emily was alive and being held captive by Hamas. After 50 days in captivity, Emily was released back home and reunited with her father. Thomas, when we spoke last week, you told me about your meeting with Emily and she was released, and the time that she was released from captivity. I must admit that your story has stayed with me ever since. Would you be willing to share with the entire audience the story of your meeting, which illustrates the emotional intensity and the resilient standing of you and the heroes of the region?
Yeah. At first, we were informed that she was dead. That was horrible in itself. Then, like I say, a few weeks later, we were informed that she was actually kidnapped, which was, as you remember, was my worst nightmare. I was more relieved that she was actually dead. That's the truth. Because even in those early days, I knew what they were going to do to the captives. Rape, torture, all the things that they've done that we now know about. And I didn't want that for her. So yeah, we went through all that roller coaster of emotions, and then finally somebody said that she was on the list to come out. And yeah, you're overjoyed, but you had to keep the emotions completely down. You want to scream for joy, but anything could happen, anything. From our side, we could mess it up. The deal would go wrong. They could mess it up. So it was a very long wait from the announcement that she was on the list to when we got her back. And they delayed it, of course, just to prolong the torture. It was all a game of mental torture. But yeah, finally, in Chatzurim, Dafka, we were waiting for her, and she finally came out. And then I finally saw her blue eyes. And then, only then, I could release my emotions. It was a miracle, absolute miracle. And you don't believe it would ever happen. And that's what I want all the other parents and all the other families, friends of the captives now, to feel. It's the best feeling in the world. I just hope it happens.
You grew up in Ireland as a Christian, exposed to the stories of the Holocaust as part of the history of nations. Did you ever believe that one day you would experience such a personal atrocity, or that it is even possible at all?
Yeah. One of the first books I ever read from choice, not in school, was a little book called Eva. And I was deeply touched by the story of this little girl. And from then, I just read everything I could get about the Holocaust and Poland and everything I could get my hands on. Mila, 18, massive big book with tiny little writing, but I couldn't stop reading. So yeah, I had a lot of knowledge about the Jewish culture and what happened to them. And finally, I got a chance to come to Israel to be a volunteer and feel firsthand the culture of Israel and the Jews. It was fantastic. I loved it. I'm going off track. Keep me on.
We were talking about the belief that something like that
Right.
ever happened.
Yeah. Yeah, even back in the early days, after, I don't know, 5 years being in Kibbutz Be'eri, I just felt that one day they would have to break out. They would just have to break out. That they wouldn't tolerate it forever. Well, I really did. I thought about building a secret room that they did in the Second World War, because, you know, I'd read about it. I thought, that's a damn good idea, just in case. So yeah, I did imagine something bad would happen one day. I just really didn't think it would happen to us. Yeah, it was an awful day, an absolutely awful day. Thank God I survived, Emily survived. My ex-wife didn't survive. The Jewish nation will survive everything that's thrown at them because they're very strong. That's what they've done for generations of history. Anything that the world throws at them, they will survive it and become stronger.
So talking about optimism, about the Jewish nation surviving, in my conversations with Thomas, we discussed themes of growth and reconstruction that are all captured in the phrase, "We will rise from the ashes, nitzmach min ha'efer ve'ha'afar." Thomas presented an image that really resonated with me, the phoenix, of Fachol. Now I'd like to ask all three of you a brief question. Please share with us one personal vision of victory, your own version of the phoenix.
For me, the phoenix, the rising from the ashes, will be seeing children on Nir Oz.
When I think of the phoenix, rising from the ashes, I think of the saying, sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. And that's kind of the glimpse of hope I hold on to, is that even though things are bad and they're getting worse, it gives me hope that hopefully from there we will get better and the world will be better.
Yeah, the ashes, the phoenix. My ex-wife, Narkis, she was killed because they'd fired an RPG at her house and it was burning, so she made a decision to make a run for it. And she was shot along the way, 40 paces from safety. after a few days, we went back to Kibbutz Be'eri, and literally there was nothing. There was the outside walls and nothing left inside, but pure ashes, molten metal. So me and Aidan and Natalie, my two older kids, were on our knees, literally going through the ashes to try and find any memento of Narkis, something, a keepsake, a memory. We found a few earrings, melted, dirty, encrusted in ash. But at least it was something. But Kibbutz Be'eri itself is, it's devastated like all the kibbutzim, like all the south. It's devastated. It's in ashes, a lot of it. And we're not there. The whole south is not there. It's unoccupied. They've won that piece of land. They're not occupying it, we're not occupying it, but they've won that piece of land. So we have to go back. We have to go back. And that's where we will rise, literally from the ashes. We have to go back. And we have to feel protected. That's the main thing. We're going to go to, we're refugees at the moment. We're in Gedi Be'eri, in the Dead Sea area. We're going to go to Chetzarim when it's finally done. And then we'll wait there until Be'eri is finally fixed and ready. But the overriding question before we can ever move back to Be'eri is the state of the government, the state of the army, and the state of Hamas. Only those three factors can we decide to move back. We have to feel safe, truly protected. Otherwise, we will never go back. And no one else will either. And they will have won that land just because we don't go back.
Another thing that has to happen is that all the hostages have to return home as soon as possible.
Thank you, Liat. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Thomas. And I think they all deserve a standing ovation.
Thank you so much for your bravery and your willingness to share with us your stories. Thank you so much.